Expectations that key developed market central banks would provide some monetary stimulus this month. In Japan, it was a positive day with the Nikkei share average firming by 0.95% at the close to end at 21,620. The Hang Seng stocks also closed higher, boosted by expectations that both the ECB and US Fed Reserve would inject some monetary easing this month. The Hang Seng index rose 0.3% to end at 28,466 points. Chinese stocks were buoyed by infrastructure and IT firms. This as the newly launched Nasdaq-style star market continued to attract attention. The Shanghai Composite Index ended the day up 0.5%, 2,899 points. Wall Street started trade on a slow note yesterday, with investors wary of making any strong bets ahead of the Fed's meeting next week. Its earnings season and market players will be looking out for performers from giant tech companies like Facebook and Amazon, which are set to release results later this week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day up 0.07%, 27,171 points. The S&P 500 rose by 0.29%, 2,985, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq performed better, closing 0.71% in the black at 8,204 points. Let's continue getting you market news. We're going to cross to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange now. My colleague Arabile Gumede is standing by. Very good afternoon to you, Arabile. What's happening in the market this afternoon?
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. Well, we got a 2/3% uptick there in that market movement today, so a much better picture coming through. It certainly hasn't necessarily filtered all the way through from Asia, even though there was some sense of positivity. We do have, of course, the star market out in China as well, where a lot of the tech firms are operating, and that has been quite interesting to look at, with some companies there going down and up in different directions then as well, with high amounts being put forward there. Quite interesting as well to note, having seen that breaking news story a little bit earlier, with Boris Johnson confirmed as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Not much by way of movement when it comes to that currency, whether it be against the US dollar or against the South African currency as well. So not much to write home about there, but it will be interesting, of course, to continue to look out for his policies, as well as what happens with regards to trade negotiations as well. And of course, Brexit continues to be the saga of the United Kingdom, and just how they will be able to roll that one ahead. Speaking about numbers, let's unpack exactly how things look for now, and we'll get into the details in just a bit. As you can tell, there's a slight improvement when it comes to the currency, particularly against the likes of the US dollar then as well today. So a much better stance. But what happens then with regards to the SOEs being given a helping hand as well? How does that impact South Africa's currency? And what will the likes of Moody's actually say with this? Of course, Moody's is the only ratings agency that still has South Africa within investment grade. And that will certainly be of interest, and we'll hopefully get their comment. But for now, let's chat to Travis Robson from IG South Africa about this market movement and a little bit more. Travis, thank you so much for joining us. A good time, always good having you, rather. 2/3% up for the JSE today. What would you really attest that to? Is there really much in this market right now, or is it just a case of let's see what happens?
I think there's two things that I attribute to it. We've had some good earnings data coming out. We've seen the likes of Kumba, subsidiary businesses, AMS and Anglo's coming out, so it's following on for that. So I think that will prop the market up a little bit. But I think the major driving force for our market is definitely linked to the Asian markets. So we saw higher Asian markets on the back of announcement that we're going to see some sort of chats or the envoy for the US president and president of China to meet again to discuss trade talks. And that's just been muted since probably June this year. So I think that's just pushing through into our market, and it's just a follow-on from the Asian markets at the moment.
Yeah. Speaking of the Asian markets, you've got that Star exchange sort of coming on board as well. A little bit of a crazy one, though, isn't it? A bit wild as well in the way it trades.
Yeah, To be honest, I haven't done a lot of research into it, and I looked at it earlier today, and it was up 120%.
Yeah.
So very much, for those who don't understand, it's a tech stock, or basket of tech stocks, similar to the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
And there's a minimum requirement of about $73,000 per investor to deposit into that. The government is very much behind it, and they're not stopping anybody from investing it. They just have that minimum caveat. It looks like some really interesting stocks in there. And for me, the biggest question is, how much would the NASDAQ be affected from foreign inflow coming in from Asian people looking to trade the NASDAQ, which is your traditional tech sector, to look at this new Star exchange. Very interesting, still early days, but yes, up 520%.
Jeepers, absolutely crazy movements there. I wonder, do you think is that sustainable? Is that just perhaps the early swings of that market? Because they have allowed it to perhaps swing as wildly as possible for now, but that later on hopefully will get, a little bit capped, hopefully. Do you think that, a sense of upward trajectory becomes sustainable for the Chinese market?
I think it's purely just an exchange trying to get as many people on board. Usually when an exchange hits certain thresholds, 10-15% like our exchange, you go into like a liquidity auction or an auction period. For here, there just seems to be upside, and they're just pushing liquidity into this exchange. And to answer your question, I don't know where it's going to go to, but looks very positive. Looks like there's government backing, and it looks like an interesting market. With the Asian stocks, if you take 10 cents that we're as investors in South Africa more familiar with, there's some really interesting technology stocks driving the Chinese market. And if people, especially foreign flow investors, can get access to it, I think there will be a big shift into this market. My biggest thing is, how much would the NASDAQ be affected by going forward?
Yeah, quite interesting. Okay, if we turn our attention then locally, we have Kumba Iron Ore, as you mentioned a little bit earlier on. 239% uptick there in those earnings numbers, revenue jumping sky high, and then over 30 Rand as well with that dividend.
Yeah.
Clearly everything going well for now.
Really good news, 77% jump in revenue, like you say, 239% increase in their headlines earning. That's a triple-digit move. Fantastic to see from one of our local mining stocks. I think a lot of it was attributed to better grade or a better iron ore pricing. I think we saw it at $108 per ounce, and it used to be around $60 an ounce. Very attractive for the shareholders as well. You got a nice dividend. I think the dividend payout is almost 98% ratio of what the HEPS attributed to for the earnings, which is really good to see. And it's nice to see our South African companies paying good dividends back. For many a time we've seen depressed earnings from local South African companies, especially within the mining sector stocks. And we've seen everybody saying economic uncertainty, pressure on the market, and that's been the undertone from every CEO that's reported. And now we're actually seeing some really good numbers coming out of this company, and it's good to see. I mean, is Kumba a major player on our top 40 index? It used to be. It's not now. We're very driven by British American Tobacco, your AB InBevs and your Naspers. But I think it's a really good stock to watch, and it's a very pleasing news for the local bourse.
It has kept up quite well, I think, pretty recently. It hasn't done amazingly, but the restructuring of all the Anglo brands as well has been very helpful to the stable, though, hasn't it? I mean, seeing Anglo Platinum yesterday, Kumba Iron Ore today, they've generally done well, and they've taken advantage now of having seen all the hard work a little bit early on.
It's quite different to what you see what's happening with Sibanye. Very much a gold stock now going into the platinum sector. They're looking at Lonmin's stable to see if it can purchase some unused mines. So you find new up-and-comers looking to diversify. ARM is a very good example of a diversified mining house. But then you've got a real Anglo's Bulletins using its intuition to actually strip out those businesses from platinum to iron ore to Anglo's, where you've got your core diversified into copper and other stables. Really interesting, doing really well. I'm not the biggest fundy on the mining stocks, but it's really good and impressive to see what's going on in that market.
Very quickly, I have run out of time, but that Rand price, 13.88, sustainable, perhaps below 14?
Very much linked to what's happening in the US. High US Asian markets, going to be a push to equity rather than Rand. So for now, I think it is stable unless we get any uncertainty from a global perspective.
As well, those interest rates out of the US will probably be
that to be key, but that's the 30th of July. But I think as we start digesting it, we'll start seeing a play on our Rand, because that's going to be linked to US denominated move.
Travis, appreciate the time.
Sure.
Really great having you. Travis Robson from IG South Africa there, helping us unpack that market movement. So, positive turn to things then, 0.2% high for now for the JSE All Share. Will it stay that way? We'll certainly see. 13.88 as well for the rand against the US dollar. From me, that's where the buck stops. It's back to my colleague Nzinga right after this.